For the brain starter here, we have to factor x squared minus 20x plus 125. So factor it. Of course, we're looking for numbers that multiply to positive 125 and add up to negative 20. So in this case, the answers are x minus 15 times x minus 5. I bring this up not because it's entirely useful with the half-angle identities in solving equations, but simply because we are still going to have to factor in these sorts of problems. And in the end, we may end up with more than one result. So in this problem here, we have to solve the equation of sine squared of x equals 2 cosine squared of x over 2. And since the cosine has the x over 2, it means we're going to replace it with this. So in our sense, we're just going to rewrite this as sine squared of x equals 2. And since this whole thing's squared, I'm going to put it in parentheses and square it just because of that squared right there. So we're going to do plus or minus, but again, the plus or minus won't really matter because we're squaring it, so it's going to turn out positive in the end anyways. So it's like square root of 1 plus cosine of x all over 2. Now, when we take a square of a square root, why, that all just cancels. So we have sine squared of x equals 2 times 1 plus cosine of x over 2. Clearly these 2's will cancel out, and we're left with sine squared of x equals 1 plus cosine of x. It's important to remember now that sine squared of x also equals 1 minus cosine squared of x, which is a Pythagorean identity. So I'm going to substitute it here. Now if we subtract the entire right side and move it over to the left side, what's happening is the 1's are going to cancel out, and you're going to be left with negative cosine squared x minus cosine of x equals 0. Now what we can do here is factor out a cosine, since there's a cosine in both of these. So we have cosine of x times negative cosine of x minus 1 equals 0. Now there are two distinct times when that actually works out. It's when either cosine of x equals 0 or when negative cosine of x minus 1 equals 0. You should know that cosine of x equals 0 when x is either 90 degrees or 270 degrees. Now with this one we have to do a little bit more work. So we have to add 1 to both sides. And we get negative cosine of x equals 1. And then if you divide by a negative 1, we're looking for the time when cosine of x equals negative 1. And that is, of course, at x equals 180 degrees. So our final answers, there's 3 of them. X equals 180, 90, or 270. You could plug it back into the original equation and check it if you want to.